Welcome to the Student Hub Live very special event, See One, Do One, Teach One, the key to success for veteran scholars. Now, my name's Karen Foley and I'm a lecturer at the Open University, and I'll be hosting today's discussion, and we have some fantastic guests lined up for you today. This event is being put on specifically and only for all scholars who are studying with the Open University, supported by the Disabled Veterans Scholarship Fund. So welcome to today's session. Now, this is a live and online interactive event, and we'll also have the video for you to catch up on at another time. But if you'd like to talk to other people in the chat, it's a great opportunity to be able to speak to people about whatever's on your mind and also to ask questions to our panel. So you can chat in the chat box, and that's all attached to your name. And we've also got some widgets or some interactive voting tools that you can fill in to let us know where you are and how you're feeling, what level you're studying, and what you're studying and why you're studying, and what you're most excited about and what also you might be most worried about if you're just starting your studies. So today's programme is going to form a range of different interviews, and as I've said, you can ask questions to our panel and talk to each other in the chat box. And first, I'm going to interview Joan Simmons, who's the Associate Dean of Teaching Excellence and the Academic Lead for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at the Open University. I'm then going to introduce you to Sir Christopher Colville. We're then going to hear from two veteran scholars, Greg and Barry, and we're then going to talk about the evaluation of the scheme by some of our academic consultants, Kate and Mike. And finally, we're going to talk about employability with Paul and Colin and Jen from our careers team. So firstly, if I could welcome Joan Simmons. Now, Joan, you're the Associate Dean in the Faculty of Wellbeing, Education and Language Studies at the Open University. And Joan, you've led this year-long project to evaluate the Disabled Veterans Scholarship Fund. And you've been focusing on some of the key factors that contribute to successful study for veteran scholars, as well as the lived experience and the challenges involved with studying at a distance. So I wondered firstly if I could ask you why the Open University is so well positioned to support the Disabled Veterans Scholarship Fund.
Hi, Karen. Yes, the Open University prides itself on its open entry, on the fact that anyone can study and come and study with us. And so we actually talk about universal education. So the Open University can educate and offers education to everybody. And part of our mission is to be open to people, places, methods, and ideas. So because we offer open entry education, we then build in support mechanisms, support for academia, support for all sorts of things like IT skills and a whole raft of study skills. So when it came to the Disabled Veterans Scholarship Fund, the OU, because of its setup, because of the support structures there, is the ideal university to offer this scheme.
And what have you been doing specifically? I'd mentioned some of the areas that you've been covering, but can you tell us a bit about your lived experience and being involved in this scheme?
Okay, so I was asked by the Development Office to run this evaluation project because the project has been running now for 2 years and looking forward to a third cohort of students. And the Development Office was very keen to find out what's good, what's not so good, what can we change, what can we improve. So with Mike and Kate, who you're going to talk to later, we planned a whole project to interview some of the veteran scholars, to get from them what is it like, you know, and like today's the heading of today's event, tips for success, you know, see one, do one, teach one. So if we can actually look at what's really good, what's helpful for future scholars, we can really enhance the scheme and enrich it as it goes forward.
Now, you've mentioned a couple of sort of, I guess, unit areas at the Open University, and very often, you know, whilst we're very accustomed to speaking about the Development Office and the names of various faculties, sometimes for students, those ideas can make a little less sense. And it's interesting, I guess, within your role of equality, diversity and inclusion, and also working with the Development Office, so a specific area of the university, who are also integrated within a faculty. This seems to be an area that you're very much embedded in, but also that spans more than just one area of study.
Oh yeah, equality, diversity, and inclusion is all over it's everybody needs to have equality. So we pride ourselves at the OU to ensure that people who have disadvantages, and perhaps with the veteran scholars, they might be medically discharged or injured in action, and so they may come with experiences in their life that might disadvantage their ability to freely study and hit the ground running. And so that's why the OU, with the support structures, and you'll hear from Colin and Paul at the end of this session about all of the raft of support mechanisms that are there specifically to help the veterans to be successful.
And there is so much on offer, as we're going to find out today, for students as well. So there's lots that people can explore, etc. also. But Joan, tell me about one of the things that you found really rewarding from your point of view about being involved in this scheme. And one of the things we were talking about earlier when planning this was the role of community and coming together. And I know that's something very close to your heart in terms of being a very supportive thing for students.
Yeah, one of the things that I found was quite humbled to read was the transcripts from the interviews that Kate and Mike have actually undertaken with the veterans. I was really impressed with the amount of response we got, with people coming forward saying, I'm willing to help, I'm willing to engage, I'm willing to talk to other veterans, and just the daily struggles that some of the veterans are dealing with every day. And then on top of that, they have study, time management, the anxiety of TMAs, and really quite a humbling experience to know that our veteran scholars are being successful in study despite everything that has been thrown at them.
And it's important for people to support each other when they understand those challenges specifically, which is one of the reasons I know you put this event on.
Absolutely, because the one thing that could be seen as a real challenge through distance learning is the isolation. So you're at home in doing your study, worrying about your TMA, wondering how to interpret it, how to be successful, and you might not know who else to talk to. So really, we're hoping that one of the things to come out of today is that there will be greater support, that the veteran scholars will come to know each other a little bit better, and I know Sir Chris is very keen on the notion of a community support network, and I think it's there for the taking. It's just making it happen.
Absolutely, and encouraging people to take advantage of all of this phenomenal support on offer.
Absolutely.
Joan Simmons, thank you very much. I think you're going to leave our virtual studio and pop into the chat. Thank you very much, Joan.
Thank you, Karen.
And also,
thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. And also on the chat, we have Jen, who is part of our careers team. Jen, how are people at home?
Yeah, I think everyone is doing well. People are saying that they're very excited, a little bit nervous, intrigued. So hopefully the event will kind of put them at ease and kind of give them a bit of an insight into what's going on.
Brilliant. That's absolutely wonderful, Jen. Thank you. So now I'm going to interview you to introduce you even to Sir Chris Colville, who I'm going to interview. So Chris is an air marshal who had a distinguished career in the Royal Air Force, followed by a second career in business in the third sector. And Sir Chris is the Disabled Veterans Scholarship Fund ambassador, and he is very, very passionate about the Open University, so much so that he's taking time out of his holiday to be here with us today. And he is a pioneer graduate, having started his first degree in 1970. So very warm welcome, Sir Chris. And also, you'd asked me to share that if any students here would like your email, because you are supporting this particular group of people in their studies, you're very happy for them to get in touch. So if you would like Sir Chris's email or to ask him any questions or ask advice, etc., then do email studenthub@open.ac.uk and we will forward your details to him. And that is for people in our Disabled Veterans Scholarship Fund. So, Sir Chris, you did not go to university after school, did you? Or have we got your microphone on, Sir Chris?
Yeah.
There, I think I can hear you now. I was hanging on your every virtual word, but I couldn't quite hear you then. So my question was about you didn't go to university straight after school and why you didn't do that.
Yeah, are you hearing me okay now, Karen?
Perfect. That's wonderful.
Okay. Yeah, I was very lazy, and Cranwell seemed a far better option. I wanted to fly. I'd done some gliding with the Air Cadets, and I'd done a little bit of flying. And to be honest, it was the right decision at the time. If I'd gone to university at 18, I suspect I would have been kicked out of any decent university because I really wasn't ready to study at that stage.
Okay, so what then, when you found the Open University, what particularly interested you about the Open University? Why were you attracted to the organisation?
Yeah, I was a little older then. It was 1969 when I heard Harold Wilson mutter the expression "University of the Air," which was actually the first time I'd heard about it. Uh, I'd grown up. I didn't have a degree at Cranwell. Cranwell didn't give degrees during those days, even though it was a 3-year course. I had my wings and I was commissioned, but I felt I needed to broaden my horizons. And this seemed an ideal way to balance my busy life with the Royal Air Force with what had developed as a hunger for more knowledge. And as you said earlier, and it makes me sound terribly old, doesn't it? I enrolled the very first year of the Open University in 1970, and my number, which I still remember, is AO292044.
Wow, that's wonderful. So were you attracted because of it being the University of the Air, or were you attracted by what you chose to study?
Well, I really wanted to do a little bit more on the science side to start with. And I looked at this wonderful course, S100, it was called, the Science Foundation course. Many of your students won't know that in those early days, we had to do 2 foundation courses, which I think was probably quite a good idea. It gave a very broad foundation then to studies. I was a young fighter pilot, and I wanted to really improve my science knowledge, but then I wanted to move on to what I stayed with, which was the politics, sociology, and economics of what was then the D stream, D100. And I think it was really helpful to me as a young fighter pilot. It matured my self-discipline, as Joan was saying, having to organize your life to do your TMAs around a busy life. And it also gave me, I think, an extra dimension in human context. The RAF colleagues, they were all a little bit like me, the wonderful company, but tended to be very much the same sort of person with commonly held views. The OU was very different, and I had this wonderful experience of meeting all sorts of different people. And I think that actually made me a better team player and subsequently, I think, a better leader. So that's what really attracted me in those early days.
So you were doing then an open degree, and you chosen, as you said, a level 1 science subject and then a psychology module as well. I mean, you've mentioned some of the things that it helped, but how useful were those discipline areas to what you were doing as a young fighter pilot?
Well, I think the science was particularly relevant, obviously, for what I was doing as a young fighter pilot. But I think, I'd like to think of the broadening aspects of what I did with D100 and the subsequent social science courses. And it's really important to me as I became a commander to have this broader view, and particularly I found the sociology courses extremely helpful. This was the Cold War, of course, and we had very complex issues to be considering. We had the threat of nuclear annihilation, and a lot of people were asking questions then about not only the relevance of deterrence, was it really going to work, but also the legitimacy of a war that in the end would probably bring the human race to an end. And I found that particularly the Social Science Foundation course and the subsequent courses in sociology, economics, and politics really helpful in getting my mind around some of these very complex issues.
So was it the issues or the way of thinking, the sort of way that qualifications often encourage you to think more critically, to evaluate the evidence sources? Was it the way you were studying, or was it what you were studying that helped a little bit later on?
Well, I think it was probably both, but it's really important, I think, as you mature through life, and we all have an opportunity to become wiser. Not everyone takes advantage of that. You can be old and stupid, but you can actually be old and wise. And I think one of the big things I learned was actually to open my mind to other points of view. And that really was to a very large extent my exposure, not just to the course, but to the views of my fellow students. And that was a marvelous thing. I have to say the summer schools I found particularly useful in that regard. Meeting people, I'd meet a foreman from a coal mine. I'd meet someone from the steel industry, someone who was selling cars. I always tell a story about the very first summer school I went to, which was in Norwich at the University of East Anglia. And a rather bolshy, stroppy, self-confident lecturer came in to talk to us. And he was talking down to us a little. And I said, Thomas, I think maybe we should introduce ourselves. And he said, I beg your pardon. I said, well, you seem to think you're talking to a bunch of undergraduate students from the University of East Anglia. I said, well, I'll start by telling you that I'm flying the fastest aeroplane in the world, and I'm actually an instructor on the fastest aeroplane in the world. Now, John here, and John said, well, I'm actually a consultant physician in a hospital in London, and I specialize in orthopedic. And at this point, we went round the group, and very soon, poor old Thomas realized that he was probably the least experienced of all of us. He changed his attitude completely. But I think that makes the point, Karen, of the wonderful diversity of Open University students, and that meant an enormous amount to me during my studies and in my career as well.
No, absolutely. Often when I'm doing a tutorial or something, I sit there and think, these people know so much more than I do, particularly if I'm doing a course with paramedics, etc. But one of the things I've always enjoyed so much is that there is this wealth of experience from our student population. But so often they hang on every word of the teacher or the person who's delivering the information, and they somehow aren't always mindful that actually people around them often are so wise in not only the things that they know about, but the tips and strategies that they've got through getting through this whole qualification. So you seem to be very much about this holistic approach, your studies fitted into life, etc. And I wonder if you could tell us, in your opinion, what the key ingredients to success in life are, and I guess how study and learning may play a part in that.
Well, it's an interesting word, success, isn't it? It means different things to different people. I like to think of the word fulfillment as being more important in this context, and I think it's easier to answer. And I suggest there are three major ingredients to fulfillment. The first is health. Be as healthy as you can be in mind and body. The second, a close and happy personal relationship, ideally, but not essentially within a nuclear family. I think that's so important. And the third is to have a career and lifestyle that brings challenges and gives you satisfaction. Now, there is another element I just want to mention, and of course this group, this wonderful group that we're talking to today knows this only too well, and certainly far better than I ever could. Sometimes you're dealt a bad deck of cards, but you've just got to make the best of the cards in your hand. And that can be really hard at times, as I'm sure many of our DVSF students will confirm. But in the end, you've only got one life, and even those with a really bad deal can make a life that is full and rewarding. And I just want to tell you very briefly about a wonderful lady that I met when I was the officer commanding Royal Air Force Coningsby, which was converting to the Tornado at the time in Lincolnshire. And Lynn Ellis, this lovely lady, had cancer. It had started as carcinoma. It had gone into her brain. She was in terrible pain. Half of her face had been eaten away, and she was always covered. Her face was nearly always covered up. And she came along to me one day and said, I'm a typist. I've had no great education, but I've decided that I'm going to do something useful with whatever life I've got left. And she started making money as a project for people suffering from cancer and for cancer research. And she did this so well. She actually ended up getting an MBE. She had tea with the Queen. And shortly before she died, I spoke to her and said, well, you've absolutely done a marvelous thing, Lynn. I said, I just can't believe you've done this with everything that you've had to endure. And she said, having gone through this experience has actually enriched my life. She said, it may sound strange, but it's enriched my life. She said, I wouldn't have been able to come and talk to the station commander, RAF Coningsby, or go and have tea with the Queen, or all the things I've done if I hadn't been through this. And I thought, what a wonderful example of someone who's had a really bad deck of cards, but has made the very best of it.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you. I know that you've got a massive fan club in the chat room, Sir Chris. So thank you for sharing all of this. I wonder if you might share with us also how your Open University degree has helped you in your life. If indeed it
Well,
has, that's a very big assumption.
yeah, I think you can assume that it did. Well, it's all part of the challenges and satisfaction that I mentioned in the last answer to your question. It's too easy in a structured career like the armed forces to drop into a very complacent mindset. And my Open University studies gave me a constant intellectual set of challenges, and I think it enabled me to engage with different people, and added to a sense of fulfillment that I was doing as much as I could with my life. And I actually do think it made me a better person, certainly a better team player, because of my ability then to be more objective and to listen to other people's points of view. And I think later it made me a better commander.
And I wonder if you could also tell us about how you got involved with the Disabled Veterans Scholarship Fund.
Yeah, I did 50 years in uniform. I was a cadet in the Air Training Corps, and I did 38 years in the regular Air Force, and then did a few more in the Volunteer Reserve, flying cadets mainly at weekends. Interestingly, I went from being an air marshal in the regular Air Force to being a flying officer in the Volunteer Reserve. It's what we all had to do. And on one occasion, I was getting into Royal Air Force Waddington in Lincolnshire, and there was a chap there in the new Guard Service, the MOD Guard Service, who recognized me from my last job as a Commander-in-Chief. And he said, "Hello, sir. You remember me? I'm Sergeant Cook." And I said, "Yeah, I remember you. You were at Innsworth." And he said, "That's right, sir." He said, "Just for appearances, sir, I'd better check your ID." So I showed him my latest identity card, which of course had Flying Officer Colville, very lowly rank, on it. And he said, "This is an O1, sir. It says Flying Officer." And I said, "Look at the photographs." And he said, "My God, sir, have you been busted?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I have actually." And he said, "All the way from Air Marshal to Flying Officer?" He said, "Was there a woman involved?" And I said, "There were three actually, Sergeant. You let me in with a salute." Yeah, and anyway, I was going back to answering your question. I spent a long time in the service, and I was a Cold War warrior. I never had to go through what a lot of our students in the DVSF have been through. We did. That said, we lost a lot of pilots in those days. We lost about 10% of our Lightning pilots. Mainly through accidents, but when you're flying the fastest aeroplane in the world at high speed at low level at night in cloud, you make a mistake and you're probably going to die. But really, nothing like the sort of physical and mental trauma that our students have been through. But I was in the Middle East on one occasion, and I was talking to a young officer in his 20s who'd had with his team to clear up the mess after an IED had exploded under a bus with children and their mums on board. And I thought, no one should have to witness this horror, least of all such a young person. And I realized that I owed it to my comrades in arms who suffered physically, mentally, or both to help them as best I could. And I really think that the DVSF is one of the greatest ways to help our wounded warriors move on and make even more of their lives.
Absolutely. And so, Chris, I could listen to you all day. In fact, I'd love to have a large glass of wine and spend a whole evening talking about this, but we can't for now. But you've not only cared passionately about the scheme, I know that you've also fundraised a lot for it. But I just wondered if I could end with your final piece of advice for students, because we must move on and find out about the support that we have on offer for them also. So what would be your top advice?
Well, I'm reluctant to offer any advice to this group because they've done so much for our country, and I really do appreciate it. And I want to stress that to all of our students. You are appreciated, if not always understood. But I would say be patient with people who have trouble comprehending what you've gone through and still do today. They mean well, even though sometimes they irritate you, and I can understand that. Above all, trust the love of your friends, family, and those who are trying to help you. They may not always get the words right, and sometimes it is difficult to get the words right, but their hearts are in the right place. Just reach out and touch them at a social distance for now, of course.
Brilliant. So, Chris, that has been an absolutely wonderful interview. Thank you so much for all of the work you've done with the scheme and for taking time out of your holiday as well to be with us today. I hope the sun is shining there and that you're able to now go and relax and enjoy the weather.
I will indeed. And just to stress, if any of the students want to talk to me, to contact me, just go through you, Karen. I'd be delighted to take on a one-on-one engagement.
Thank you very much. So don't forget, you can email studenthub@open.ac.uk and we'll put you in touch with Sir Chris. So Chris, enjoy the rest of your day and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Karen.
Jen, how is everybody doing at home?
Everyone is doing well. I think, yeah, like you said, they've got a lot of love for Chris going on. And interestingly, Chris said at the beginning, he was talking about at the age of 18, university wasn't relevant to him. And I think a lot of our students feel the same way, hence why they went into the forces. But hopefully now is the right time.
Brilliant. No, absolutely. It's always a good time to start. Never an ideal time, I might add, but always a good time. And all of us have numerous challenges along the way. I remember one of my students couldn't send his submission in because he was in a submarine for a number of times, so I gave him an extension. But let us hear now from Greg Stevenson and Barry Lawson, who are both student veterans. So it's wonderful, of course, for our new students to hear from current students, to see live, breathing, thriving Open University students, because sometimes at the very beginning we can be ever so nervous. So Greg, you're a keen sportsman. You joined the military after leaving school. You weren't sort of sure about further education and you preferred an active life. And you now want to go into sports coaching. So that's the degree pathway that you've chosen. And you try and do as much sport as possible, particularly rowing. So welcome very much today, Greg. And Barry, we were a medic in the Royal Navy and you studied with the OU when you were in service for personal development, but you're still keen to stretch and challenge yourself. And after some consideration, which I can imagine was very challenging, you've opted for a course in English literature, which is a subject that fits very well with your talents. So two very different people here. Let's talk about what advice you would give for other students. So what sorts of things do you think that you need to have in place right at the start to be able to succeed in your studies? Greg, could I come to you first?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me along. So the first thing I would say is to really, familiarize yourself with the online stuff. So, have a look at the library, download the information that's on offer, things like the Harvard Referencing Guide. And I don't want to put anyone off as general with any terminology, but when you read about the things that are on offer, make sure you check it out. And, don't worry too much about getting stuck straight into the course. Make sure you take that week before. And you will be advised to do this, but make sure you do it because it's really tempting to get stuck straight into the sort of academic work rather than actually focusing on familiarizing yourself with the system and understanding the logins and the actual, because when you look at the vast amount of support, it's pretty tremendous.
Absolutely. No, there's so much. And also, while this event is very specific, we have some open events for all students, including you. So if you'd like to come along, we'll show you about the virtual learning environment, and we've got sessions from the library and career services. So if you'd like to navigate those in any other way with lots of other students also, please do check out the Student Hub Live website and you can see more about the events we've got on offer. That's very sound advice, Greg. And it's like becoming a new, it's like learning a new language. You learn the new terminology, the new things, and that all makes you feel part of the community as well, doesn't it? Barry, what would you say to new students? What do you think would help them to set things up in place so that they can succeed?
It's a very good question. Everybody's situation is different. I'd sort of go off piste a little bit from the sort of academic side and look at the sort of your health. So for somebody coming into the disability scholarship fund, I think the first thing you've got to sort of get together is how you manage your disability and get that sorted. Because if you've got that in place, then things, when it comes to doing your learning, that then will make life a lot easier. So if you then speak to your sort of support team, whether that's your doctor, physio, mental health professional, whatever it is, let them know what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve. And also your relationships at home and external relationships, let them know what you're able to do. And having these things in place will certainly help you get on the ground running and make the most of your experience, because quite often it is really difficult. You'll never get it perfect. But if you're struggling, say, a couple of days in a particular week, then you get a wee bit behind. But if you can get on top of your injury or your disability, then things will be a little bit easier for you.
Sean says that's excellent advice, Barry. So thank you for sharing that. I'm just sort of
You're welcome.
reflecting on some of the things that the three of you have all said. So Chris sort of mentioned the importance of, getting to grips with studying. Many students focus on the knowledge, the learning. And one thing that they are not necessarily mindful of is that this is changing the way you think. As Sir Chris said, it changes the way that you interrogate or think about particular problems. You learn new skills, you develop those. And it's really important to have all of those basics in place so that you can learn those systems and be in the best mindset. It's not all about retaining the information or knowledge. I mean, Greg, what do you know now that you could sort of tell a new student about? Things you might have wished that you'd known when you were at the very start of your own journey.
Oh, so things like bias, which you don't realise that everybody does, and you accept as a given, So when I read about sport now, I came into it with very, I didn't realise at the time, but very shut vision on like, it has to be done this way, and now all of a sudden I'm reading evidence that says perhaps there is another avenue, and I'm really passionate about strength and conditioning, and I'm thinking, Christ, I'm doing all this training, and I'm advising other people to do X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden there's a paper I've read that suggests that might not be the best option. So it's fascinating, to actually really be sort of aware of your own biases and really pick up on that, and just be open-minded. So I say Chris sort of said it really well, that be open-minded. And I think sometimes coming from the military, it can be very easy to be sort of linear with your vision and expect, be quite strict on trying to perform to a certain set of values. But actually, the fun part for me is to actually kind of reverse that now and get excited about being open-minded and challenging my own sort of perceptions on things. So the more I read, and especially from good sources, you learn that as well. It's very easy to sort of look at information and bamboozle yourself. But actually, if you're looking at the legitimate sort of good reading sources, which you will learn, in the first couple of weeks on all these great sort of tools and courses, when you are studying and reading these papers, you can end up with a very different opinion than what you started with. And for me, that's really exciting, because that just shows the growth of your own knowledge base.
Absolutely. It can be mind-blowing at times, but also sometimes it's hard to let go of those ideas, because it's not, but it's almost akin to sort of being wrong or having thought, I wasn't doing it the right way, or there's a different way of doing it. But expanding those horizons can be so important and liberating. Barry, I wonder, because we're a bit short on time, if we could ask you, and then I'm just going to come back to you, Greg, about advice that you would give students studying with the OU using the Scholarship Fund. So specifically to these people as opposed to any other general student, what would you say is really important?
I think time management is probably the most important thing you could probably get right. As I sort of explained a little bit earlier, is that, we do have injuries, we do have disabilities that make things that little bit more difficult. So have a really good sort of plan in place for the week ahead. So sit down on a Sunday, speak to your wife or your spouse or your partner. What plans have you got, when you can fit in your studies? Equally, you might need to be a little bit flexible. And when you need to sort of add that in that flex, make sure your support is in place there. So speak to your tutor and say, I'm a wee bit behind, could I get an extension? And I've had to do it. And sometimes you have to swallow your pride. And as a serviceman, you hate having to say, I need help. But sometimes we do need to get some help. So my advice would be just sort of get a really good time management plan in place. It's not difficult for us, but sometimes it is really good to sit down, write it in pen and paper, and you should be fine. But please let people know that you need help.
Very, very good. Greg, just very, very briefly, because we're out of time, one piece of advice you would give.
Honestly, ask for help, communicate with your fellow students, and reach out, enjoy the course, make the most of it, because it can be a little bit lonely at times when you think you're the only person doing it, but there genuinely is hundreds of us and thousands of students on this pathway. So, put a bit of faith in and make sure you utilize everything to your advantage.
Well, thank you so much, Barry and Greg. As always, I'd love to talk for more, but we are out of time today. So thank you so much for joining us, and I think that's been
Thank you.
incredibly helpful to other students
thank
there.
you.
And enjoy the rest of your studies. And I hope you can do come along to other events that we have also, please. We'll see you very soon.
Thank you.
Our next section, thank you. We're going to talk to Mike Snowden and Kate Fairburn. And now Mike is a lecturer who has 20 years of teaching in a variety of different contexts and has done numerous research projects exploring the needs of students and community groups. And he's here today because he has interviewed a number of veteran scholars for the evaluation project that Joan spoke about a little bit earlier. And Kate has been working with the Open University since 2004 and has done also a lot of research projects, in particular with an emphasis on support and guidance for our students. And she too has interviewed a number of veteran scholars about this. So let's see what they had to say about all of this. So you've been involved in conducting the research. So why did you do it, and what did you find out?
Yes, thanks, Karen. I'm going to start off here. Mike and I have worked together to sort of summarise what we've been finding so far. And I mean, why did we do it? It's very much to do with what Joan was saying at the beginning, and it's been reflected by the speakers you've been looking at today as well. And it's very much to do with the whole sort of mission behind the OU, which is to do with supporting students and helping them to succeed. And so with this existence of this scholarship fund specifically for disabled veterans, we wanted to check that it was, working, that it was valuable, and if it were to be improved, how can we improve it? And how can we support students to succeed? So what we did, what we've done so far, Mike and I have been, we asked the current students to volunteer their time, and you've just seen two of them speaking there most eloquently. And of those, we've interviewed a number between us. We started back in January when we were allowed to go and visit people face to face, if you can remember those days. And we did some face to face, but since then, mostly it's been using the various amazing technology at our disposal and phones and so on. So we've done a number of those, and between us, we've shared out, reading through the transcripts and listening to what people have had to say. And we've drawn out some key themes. There's a lot more to look at. We've also looked briefly at sort of raw data like what courses people choose, what the age groups are, and so on. And Mike will talk about that in a moment. So the sort of key elements that are arising so far, first of all, is the issue of awareness. And one of the comments that's been made, you can see a good quote up there on the screen, that a lot of disabled veterans aren't aware that this exists. And also, I would sort of extrapolate from that a little, even awareness within the forces before the students are discharged for whatever reason, that this might be a route that they might be prepared to take. And even extending a little bit beyond that, awareness from the point of view of the tutors, the OU tutors, if they've got a DVSF student in their group, what is the impact of that? Does that student need extra and specific particular support of the kind that people have been referring to so far today in these very interesting talks? And I would go on to say awareness again, and so Chris has touched on this as well, awareness of the potential that an OU degree can give you. It's not just the subject that you're studying, and how to choose the right course for you, and the fact that you might start off on one module and find, well, this isn't quite the right fit for me. Is there something else I can do? Awareness of where to get support from. That's been mentioned quite a few times, and the comment comes through very strongly that students don't like to ask. I get that, but it's just this awareness that you can ask for help, and it's not the end of the world if you give an extension for your TMA. And finally, something else we're looking into a little bit is awareness of any existing qualifications or abilities or pieces of paper, certificates or whatever, that students might come from the forces with, because they're all, as has been said, highly trained, highly specialised people, and we're looking at if there's some kind of way of extending the match between what they come with and linking it to some kind of, I don't know, accreditation. This is something we're looking at, but it's very much reminding students to be confident in their own abilities, that they already come with lots of skills. And
Absolutely,
just briefly
Kate.
as
And
well,
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just mindful that we've got so much data to share here, and one of the problems with these sessions is that it goes so quickly, and that we've still got 4 other slides as well to introduce to our
Okay, well,
students.
do you want to hand over to Mike at this stage then, if we're
Yeah,
running
that would be
short of time?
brilliant, Mike. So your key thing then was about this awareness, and you've been sharing ideas about things that you're doing, and also really gaining an understanding of the student population and the issues that are there. The second slide, Mike, if you might come in here, was about helping, wasn't it?
Sure. I mean, the what was really clear, certainly with everyone that we interviewed and some of the data that we've seen elsewhere, is that the OU vets, the DSF vets, have a real desire to help. They're really keen, they're very motivated, very enthusiastic, and they really want to help others. And I think in relation to that, that lent itself quite nicely to this notion of support that we also identified. What is clear, and both Kate and Sir Chris and indeed Barry all alluded to this, is that there is some reluctance to access support. Yes, we've got lots of support available, but there is a reluctance to contact the tutor, perhaps, and contact other services. So that was a clear thing. The other thing we identified around support was that these people, our vets, want somebody who's a credible role model. That's, we're all civvies. I'm a civvy. I don't understand military life, and it is a different world. So what is important is that we're able to offer some form of support whereby tutors, lecturers, the support services have some awareness of military life in order to offer the appropriate support that is targeted to the individual. And I'd like to Sir Chris's notion of the holistic process of learning, and certainly need to think about offering holistic support. Having said that, what is clear from the data that we looked at was that it was very positive comments regarding the support available, and in particular, perhaps something that we could improve or perhaps work towards is looking at local like-minded groups, offering some one-to-one support in terms of peer support, buddy systems, establishing a community for our veterans.
Thank you. No, that's brilliant, Mike. The other thing that you spoke about, in addition to those sort of community aspects, were that there were specific sorts of skills and knowledge also that really did benefit from developing within this cohort.
Yeah, one of the things that we explored in particular was, yes, you're enrolled on a course. What have you learned? How has the course contributed to your development of you as a person, and in terms of your skills and knowledge? And what I like is a couple of quotes that are on this slide here. That firstly, that I've started to look at things differently. It's opened their eyes into different perspectives. And this, I think, is a wonderful quote that I've taken. Is that just because the OU says it doesn't mean it's says something, it doesn't mean it's true. So what these courses, what the study program is doing, is really encouraging our vets to question thinking, and looking at different perspectives, being much more critical and much more evaluative in their studies and in their day-to-day life. Yes, we know that students have developed subject-specific knowledge. They've learned different ways of writing. As Greg was saying, referencing, the devil of referencing, literature searching, finding information both on the internet, using the library, and using books. But importantly, and this was clear in many of the interviews that we conducted, was that it offers opportunities, and I think that reinforces what Sir Chris was saying earlier.
No,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
And you've got a slide with some of the end findings in terms of the data. So could you just, in 1 minute, please, if you would be so kind,
Yep.
because we're out of time, tell us about what you found overall in terms of the data.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the data that we looked at, the demographic data, and what was clear, and we say this slide to the last because this really is our party message that age, gender, previous study experience, module choice is no barrier to success. Whatever you want to do, you can achieve, and certainly looking at success data, then you do very, very well. There's no clear study path, but what you do, you do well. And I think I could close it there.
That is absolutely wonderful. You've summed up a huge amount of research, Kate and Mike. Thank you so much. It sounds really interesting, and it's really valuable to share not only what you found, but some of the interventions and some of the ways in which you're seeking to implement the findings of your research and encourage students to recognise, I guess, that these are some very common issues, some commonalities that we see across the group, but also that the Open University are doing something about those to make sure that student studies is as successful as possible. Thank you very much both for your time today.
Thanks.
Our final section, thank you. Our final section from today's programme is talking about support, which everybody has been alluding to today. So now we're going to find out about exactly what is on offer for you. And I'm going to talk to Colin Beesley, who's the Senior Manager, Policy and Controls in Academic Services. And Colin's team, they contribute to implementing the Disabled Veteran Scholarship Funds, and they attribute this as one of their most significant achievements. And Paul Sheppard oversees the development of the delivery of effective careers and employability services to students on the Disabled Veteran Scholarship Fund. And this involves offering appropriate guidance and placements and also other opportunities to develop employability and career aspirations. And also Jen is going to multitask from our desk and talk to us. Jen is our placements manager who finds work experience placements, and she's in Manchester. And Jen, is your cat still with you today throughout the programme?
Lovely Benedict, but he's snoozing, so we'll try and get a guest appearance if I prod him a bit.
My dogs ran off to investigate a potential burglar or something of interest outside. So let's talk about some of the opportunities available. So Colin, could you talk a bit about the wraparound support that's open for students on the Disabled Veteran Scholarship Fund?
Yeah, of course. It's interesting reading the comments in the forum actually about support and how occasionally it can be difficult for students to know who to go and speak to. So one of the key things we've put in place this year is a network of what we're calling DVSF champions. So they are advisors in across the student support team network. So they're in faculties and nation offices. And the plan and the intention is that every scholar in the scheme would know who their named person is. And they will be able to get in touch with that person and ideally get the answer to their question straight away, and if not, be referred on to one of the specialist areas. So what we've seen is that although there is quite a lot of additional disability related support available to the students in the scheme, it's not really being used that often, and that's something we'd quite like to encourage. And it's interesting to hear everybody today and the comments in the forum about people not really wanting to ask or not knowing who to ask. And I would encourage anybody, if they've got any requests of any nature, really get in touch and ask, and we will see what we can do. We're really proud of the scheme and we want everybody in it to be a success.
Absolutely. No, you do. And I think sometimes there's so much support available that I know for students it can be a little bit alarming to think, well, who do I speak to about this, and this? I've heard I can get this. But ultimately, I mean, the student support team, they triage so many of these inquiries through to the disability support team or the widening access team, etc. So there are various teams in the university, but it doesn't really matter that students can identify those, does it, Colin? Because there are so many areas. Could you tell us a little bit about the disability support team and what help they may be able to offer?
Yeah, it's an incredibly broad range of support that team provides. So in addition to the sort of government funded disabled students allowances, there's another kind of layer of layer of support that the university would provide. So it could involve alternative format materials, digital recorders, loan kits with specialist software. Pretty much anything and everything that a student might need can be provided. It may not be provided as a sort of standard support package, but if there's something additional that a student might need, then by all means get in touch and we'll see if we can source it.
Brilliant. One of the things that I've heard that they do so well is they really cater for the individual. So they really look and see what is presenting, how that individual may function and study effectively. And as you say, don't give standardized approaches for this particular prognosis or label of anything, but they really do work with that person to provide appropriate support for them, which may, as you say, be tools. But they also offer other things. I mean, they're great to be able to talk with through specific problems. I've heard the student support team often have students who may be struggling with time management or, feeling anxious or having a change in circumstances. So sometimes they can be practical things and sometimes they can be the less obvious things you may want to go to somebody about support with. But people in the chat are talking about the champions, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about those, please, Colin.
So the champions are senior advisors who work in the student support teams. So their day job really is to advise any student, but what we've done this year is kind of created a network of people who are also really familiar with this scheme. We have a huge amount of staff across the SST network, and what we found actually was when scholars were calling in, they weren't necessarily speaking to someone who really knew about the scheme and their circumstances. So we've got, I think it's 18 or 19 colleagues across the SSTs who are now sort of DVSF specialists, and who'll be able to give really detailed advice to all of the scholars about where they might need to go next or what they might need to do next in order to make a module choice or put in a request for a piece of support.
Brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. Jen, has that answered people's questions about that in the chat, about the champions?
Yeah, I think the main questions are the students finding out who their champions are. I think some students have had contact, but a couple of students haven't. So should they expect contact from their champions in the next couple of weeks, or how will that work?
Good question. Colin, can you offer any advice on that?
Yes, they should expect some contact. If they haven't had any already, I'll make sure everybody's contacted in the next 10 days.
Brilliant. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for that. So, Paul, could we talk a little bit about your area and your team? Because you are offering a very specific and tailored support in terms of careers. So can you tell us a bit about what your and Jen's area do and what support you can offer our students?
Yeah, of course. Well, firstly, I'd just say there are four of us. So there's myself, Jen and Rachel, who are both helping out today on the chat box, chat room function, and Justin, our careers and employability consultant as well. So we offer bespoke and tailored support on an individual and one-to-many basis. So, it's a relatively small cohort by the standards of the Open University. So we have got the luxury of being able to offer very individual support to each and every one of these students. We also offer an array of online resources, which I've seen have been mentioned in the chat box before. So we've got the Spill the Beans podcasts, which are very interesting. There are 4 of those in place already. We've got a couple of webinars, and we've also introduced a series of blogs on a range of topics that we think will be of interest to the students in this cohort. As you mentioned before, Jen offers support with placing and offering ongoing support for work experience for students who want to access that type of opportunity. We've also, touching on the issue of a community, I've noticed that, Stefan, thank you for putting the LinkedIn group up on the chat box as well. So we've got a LinkedIn facility. We've got 56 members in that group currently, but we'd like to develop that further. We offer mentoring on a one-to-one basis as well, so that obviously students can hopefully speak to people who have got a services background as well. And Jen produces a monthly newsletter whereby we highlight all of the activities that we're undertaking and make students aware of graduate and other work experience opportunities that might be suitable for this cohort.
That sounds fantastic. You also give students a careers registration questionnaire at the beginning of their journey, don't you, Colin? Oh, sorry, I'm not Colin, Paul. Been a long day.
Yes. No, don't worry. Yes, yes, we do, and we base our responses based on the responses that we get from students. We base our services on the responses that we get. So, for example, when we had the very first cohort, there was a clear interest in areas like work experience and work placements. What we found, though, to some extent, is that students don't quite want the work experience and placement opportunities as soon as we thought that they might. So whilst we have found a small number of placements for students who are interested in that, one of the lessons that we've learned is that I think students need to get their heads around how the Open University works and the academic side of things, and then their career aims and interests are not always at the priority of their thinking as soon as they start with us. It is for some of them. So we heard from Barry earlier, who's already done a placement, but what we found is that most students want to access the career support at a time that suits them. So we're hoping that, you know, we'll be around for quite some time yet so that we can help the students on an ongoing basis.
That's wonderful. Paul, thank you very much for that. Jen, can we come to you last but by no means least, and you can tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing, and also if there are any other questions and feedback as we close this session in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Paul said, we try to work with students in a range of different areas, so podcasts, webinars, just because not one kind of size fits all. And it's really important that we can kind of work with the students as best as possible to see what they want from us. So it's been great just seeing some of the comments today of what works and what doesn't. Just got a little shout out for the newsletter, so I'm really pleased about that. It's something that I produce every month. So yeah, it really just is important to us that we know exactly what the students want. So I just really encourage the students to get in contact with us as much as possible, and let us know if we're doing something well or maybe not so well, just so we can continue to produce resources that are suitable.
Brilliant. Now, Jen, one of the things that we wanted to achieve today was to sort of get some sense of dialogue and discussion, some sense of community amongst this group, because we've only had 2 cohorts of these students. And I hope that everyone watching today sees some of the wonderful people behind the scenes and how much everyone cares about the success of every single person within this Disabled Students Veteran Fund. So how is everyone at home feeling? Are they slightly more confident about their studies? What have we learned from today, Jen?
I think it's been a strong theme of the day about that community feeling. And I think just having this kind of area for students to talk to one another, they're really interested in kind of reaching out and offering support just by kind of having this forum. So I definitely think it's important that we kind of as an organisation set up something similar that can go forward, maybe in the kind of form of another forum or somewhere where the veterans get together, because it seems that, they love communicating with one another and love helping one another as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for all the work that you've done. And thank you as well to all of our guests that we've had on today. We've had Sir Chris Colville, who, if any of you missed that, has offered everyone watching today the opportunity to get in touch with him. So if you would like to, just email us, studenthub@open.ac.uk. And Joan Simmons, who has spent many hours putting this event together for us. Mike Snowden and Kate Fairbairn, who have conducted all of the research and shared their findings. Then we've had Greg Stevenson and Barry Lawson, who've been wonderful in sharing their experiences as student veterans, and then Colin Beesley and Paul Sheppard and Jen Adamson, who are involved in the careers and academic services side of the institution. So I hope that you've enjoyed today's programme. I hope it's made you feel a little bit more connected to the Open University and, of course, to each other. This has been, as you know, a closed event specifically for Disabled Students Veteran Fund students. But the Open University do offer open events to every student as well. And if you'd like to find out more about those, you can visit the Student Hub Live website. You can just Google that. We have lots of events, and in particular, if you are a new student and you'd like to learn about the virtual learning environment, we've got sessions on tutorials. We also do specific workshops on academic writing, and we have a whole range of broadcast events, which are beginning, as of tomorrow, from each of our faculties. So we'll introduce you to people within the faculty. Those are open events. They're very, very big and buzzy, but a wonderful opportunity to meet other students. So you can find out about those and log in at your pleasure. Our Adobe Connect workshops, though, are limited in spaces, so you do need a ticket for those. And we encourage tickets to our broadcast events like this also. But you'd be more than welcome to come along to any of those that would spark your interest. It's lovely to connect with other students and share your advice and experience. But I hope that for this specific group, you feel somewhat more connected and eager to get on with your studies, whether it be your first year or second year. So thank you everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. That's all we've got time for now. You can watch the event on Catch Up afterwards. And as I say, please do check out the other events that are open to you all. Thank you all, and bye for now.